So a Russian analyst said that if they ever plan to take the Donbas, they have three options. One, throw everything they have into an attack, a plan that he said could take 5 years. Two, go on the defense and hope to wear Ukraine down over time. Or three, start launching nukes. So, yeah, seems like everything is going according to plan in Russia. Let's get into it. Now, this was an assessment posted earlier today by FighterBomber, that is a Russian milblogger or war correspondent, one of the largest accounts in Russia that's been tracking the war since day one and has a lot of connections across the military. He said, quote, "We still have to liberate 15% of Donetsk, and then Donbas will be liberated. In my opinion, we have three main ways to do this. The first is to continue a creeping offensive with varying success, regardless of the losses, which will, to put it mildly, be very significant. Judging by the current slow pace, this will take at least 5 years. It could be accelerated somewhat by sending all of our remaining military equipment and aircraft into battle, but if not done wisely and intelligently, it would result in similar heavy losses in personnel as well as additional losses in equipment." If we can pause real quick, we're 4 years into this war when it looked like Ukraine was going to topple in days, weeks, or months. And now we've got Russian analysts saying if only they can, prioritize this one area of the front and surge the entire Russian military, everything they have at the Donetsk front, maybe in 5 years, with heavy losses, they would be able to take that remaining territory. Did you catch that? That's wild. Now, we know that it would include heavy losses because we've seen an uptick in some of these larger Russian assaults in recent weeks, and as expected, those tanks, BMPs, motorcycles, or just infantry are getting destroyed well before they even reach the line of contact. In fact, just a couple days ago, the Ukrainian Third Army said they stopped the largest Russian attack in months. Quote, "On March 19th, the enemy launched the largest attempt at a breakthrough in the Liman-Severodonetsk direction. The Russian army deployed forces from the 1st Tank and 20th General Army of the Russian Federation, but the enemy began to suffer losses before reaching the contact line. They say they attacked simultaneously on 7 directions in the core sector and deployed over 500 infantry, 28 units of armored vehicles, and more than 100 units of motor vehicles, buggies, and quads. Within 4 hours, the Third Corps turned the Russian breakthrough into a massive failure. They say as a result of this attack, Russia lost 84 motor vehicles, including 11 BMPs and BTRs, 3 tanks, a heavy TOS flamethrower, 5 guns, and over 160 UAVs. We've started to see an uptick in this because Russia has seen what happens when they send individual infantry forward. So we're starting to see more amassing of armor and mechanized or just wheeled assaults, right? ATVs or motorcycles. In this case, the Third Army watched them stage for this assault and was able to wait them out. And as soon as they entered the open, just laid waste to this entire Russian assault. Brigadier General Belitsky, the commander of the Ukrainian Third Corps, said, quote, "For a month and a half, we observed signs of preparations for an offensive. The Russians intensified their attacks with mortars on our crossings across the Oskil River, trying to cut off logistics. They began to set up their own pontoon crossings and clear routes. This directly indicated preparations for a large-scale mechanized offensive. We were preparing. Defensive actions were practiced in different directions, and each brigade had its own plan for repelling an attack. The Corps coordinated these actions, and as a result, the attacks were thwarted on all directions." That's another argument for the creation of these Corps-sized elements. Belitsky used to be the commander of the Ukrainian 3rd Assault Brigade. He was promoted to the 3rd Army Corps, and it ties in multiple units in one direction for this exact type of coordinated attack, or in this case, coordinated defense. They say over the course of the day, the brigades and regiments of the 3rd Army Corps destroyed 405 enemy soldiers. 288 were killed, and the rest were casualties. They say the Russian army failed to capture either settlements or positions, adding that the destruction of the remnants of the living forces that managed to survive continues, as in they are continuing to hunt down the infantry that managed to survive in that attack. It's not a lot if 450 were seriously wounded or 405 were seriously wounded or killed of the initial 500. So that's option number one. Large-scale attack, mass forces. In this case, Ukraine saw them coming, inflicted significant casualties. The second option, going back to FighterBomber, quote, is to switch to a defensive position, dig in and start destroying enemy personnel and other targets until they run out of them, or we run out of personnel and weapons. This option has no time limit and could go on indefinitely. However, judging by this trend, the enemy is increasing its attacks on our rear. expanding both the number and radius of its strikes. And if the time goes on indefinitely, the losses in personnel will either be the same or even greater than in the first option. Now, if we can just pause and reflect on that for a second. So what FighterBomber is saying is that if Russia decides to just dig in and try to hold on to this territory right now, that could be as costly, if not more, than going on the offensive. And we've seen the losses sustained when they do that. Now, the reason for that is twofold. One, we are seeing Ukraine cut off the front with these medium-range strikes. Second, they're taking deliberate offensive clearance actions against some of these Russian positions near the line of contact. Now, starting with those medium-range strikes, what they've done is we know Ukraine has been carrying out deep strikes, say Russian oil refineries, airfields, things like that. And then you have the close-in strikes near the line of contact. We'll call that within 5 to 10 kilometers of the front. A lot of FPVs, a lot of bombers, things like that. Ukraine has focused in the last few months on cutting off that middle ground. So we'll call it 15 to 100, roughly, kilometers from the line of contact. You saw what that does in the Third Army video a second ago. Russia can't even get large elements anywhere near the front, let alone to the actual Ukrainian positions. That has also shut down the supply lines and made it very hard for Russian soldiers to move forward, to move their wounded out, or to resupply anyone that's trying to advance towards the Ukrainian lines. Now, one of the weapon systems that they're using to do that is the Lightning drone. This is kind of a mid-range strike drone. And the idea here is that it's a fixed-wing platform, very inexpensive, very easy to launch. We got a launch video of that going here. But it carries a much bigger payload than an FPV. So we've actually got a couple of videos of these being used in Ukraine right now, and you can see they're relatively slow moving, right? There's not a lot of speed to these things, but it is a big boom, able to take out relatively hardened targets. Again, kind of in the range that you would expect for artillery. That 15 to 25 kilometer range is where artillery would have focused. Right now they can't, because drones are taking out the artillery pieces, which leads us to the quick fundraiser update here. We're working with the 26th Artillery Brigade to purchase some of these Lightning strike drones. And the reason for this is, again, as the artillery gets pushed out of the limit of its range for cannon artillery, which call it 15 to 20 kilometers roughly, a lot of the artillerymen are retraining in these new platforms. And we're working to help out the 26th with these specific Lightning drones. We're almost there, $42,000 of a $50,000 goal. For those interested and able, we'll have that link in the description and pinned comment below. But it is not just the medium-range strikes that is cutting off the front. As Ukraine is doing that, we are seeing more and more deliberate raids, very well planned, very well executed, to eliminate Russian soldiers that are forward. This is one example of many in recent days. This one came from GUR Chimera Unit, part of the Timur Special Unit of the GUR Ministry of Defense. They say they successfully conducted a sweep of one of the settlements in the Zaporizhia direction. Separate groups of enemy infantry entrenched themselves in residential buildings. With skillful, methodical actions, the scouts drove the Russians out of their shelters. The special forces conducted a thorough sweep of the premises, destroyed the enemy infantry in close combat, and captured those who were lucky enough to survive. The survivors replenished the exchange fund and will later be exchanged for Ukrainian defenders. Now, when we're talking about Ukrainian offensive actions and what FighterBomber was talking about there, an issue that they're dealing with, this is it. It is not a brigade or even a battalion or even a company-sized assault. You're talking about, squad to platoon-size elements. 10, 20 maybe on the high side. Very heavily resourced. So small infantry assaults, a lot of assets available to them. You have to view this as like a special operations type mission. What comes to mind for me are like the Ranger direct action raids in Afghanistan and Iraq, where they just had resources piled on top, right? They knew exactly what they were getting into. That's what's happening here. These guys know every window of every building before they move in. They know the basements that are likely to house Russians. They know the ones that they're not sure, so they have to clear them out. And if there are, which is rare now, they know where the civilians might be located in these villages. So they are very, very deliberate and precise in these clearance operations, being very careful to not carry out large-scale assaults for no real purpose, but going in, pinprick operations, taking the Russians, killing or capturing any that are there, and then that area is secured. Now, so for the Russians, you got to think about what staying on the defense means. This is the type of headache they're having to deal with, right? They've got their supply lines cut. They can't get anything to the front, and anybody that does make it forward is being hunted down one by one by these Ukrainian operators, which of course leads to the third option presented here by FighterBomber, nuclear weapons, which of course, Russia jumps to that one pretty quickly. He says, quote, "The third option is variations of the first two using nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. The risks and our losses here are almost impossible to predict, but we must understand that every new day of the special military operation brings us closer to the moment when WMD will appear in the hands of the enemy, and there's no guarantee that he won't use it immediately." That's a new one. I feel like there's been some fear-mongering in Russia and some Russian media in the last couple months talking about UK and French plans maybe to supply Ukraine with nuclear weapons. Maybe that's what they're getting at. So he's saying we got to hurry up and use these nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction, biological or chemical weapons, because if we don't, Ukraine's going to. Again, look where we are 4 years into this conflict. It's crazy that is being floated as a possible idea. He says, quote, "We must understand that the situation for the enemy is much worse than for us, but he has enough stability and resources to continue the war for at least a couple of years, even in his current position. Perhaps either we or the enemy have some cunning plan, military genius, or a wonder weapon up our sleeve that will radically change the situation of the battlefield. But since no one has pulled that out in 4 years, there's doubt that such changes will occur." And that's largely what we talk about. When, where is the war headed from here? You're seeing it, right? Like there's some unknown futuristic weapon that's going to pop out next week, next month, or next year that could drastically change the battlefield. Okay, it hasn't happened yet. There's been a lot of things that have shifted the dynamics at times throughout this conflict, but right now you're seeing it. And from the Russian perspective, massing forces in Donetsk, 5 years to take the rest of the Donbas. That's wild. That is the type of grinding fight that we have seen playing out in Ukraine for some time. We regularly go back to cite the statistic that in some of the areas like Pokrovsk, where Russia has seen the most progress over the course of the last 12 to 18 months, that is moving at a slower pace than the Western Front in World War I. That's insane. But that's what it is. That's the heavy defensive lines that Ukraine has built, imposing a significant cost on Russia as they try to continue to achieve their military objectives in this war. Now, if you stuck around this long, be sure to check out Substack. We just got this thing up and rolling. It's kind of a consolidation of all content in one place. So right now we've got like long form and interviews here on YouTube, short form on TikTok. We share some videos and pictures on Instagram, and then the research day to day and articles and podcasts is going up on Twitter or X. Substack is all of that plus a community chat. So I'm pretty excited for it. We're not taking content down from anywhere. It's just an in addition to. So if you're using that platform, check us out. If you're not using that platform, consider taking a look over there. Whether you follow me or not, of course, would love for you to check out the page. But they've done a lot of work. It's really impressive, kind of the feed and who's publishing over there. The free access that you have to a lot of incredible work on Substack is something else. But either way, if interested, check it out. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.